Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 246 of Humanity Rising. Yesterday, we had a session on sound and the healing power of frequencies and vibrations in sound. Today in the news, it reported something very, very interesting. In 1971, NASA sent a space probe called Voyager 1 on a mission into deep space. Our sun is 93 million miles from the Earth. Voyager 1 has now, after 40 years, gone 11 billion miles. Way, way beyond our solar system. It left our solar system over a decade ago. It's now in deep, deep space. And it's still recording. And what it's recording is that on its windshield, it's experiencing intermittent, what they're calling space drops. Interstellar gas, what they call plasma waves. But more profoundly, it's picking up a hum. Deep space has a sound, and that sound is a hum, an ohm. That Voyager 1, 11 billion years from us into deep space, is recording and sending back to Earth. So I thought that would be an interesting piece of information for all of us, having contemplated the therapeutic healing power of sound. Remembering Pythagoras and the notion that sound is what emanates creation itself. In the sanctity of sound and deep space, let us just take a moment and center ourselves now in our own bodies. All of our bodies have their own frequencies, their own sounds, just like the earth and the planets have their own sounds. And for the next 60, 90 seconds or so, let us listen, if we can, to the sound of our heartbeat in a spirit of gratitude and deep thanksgiving that we're alive. All of us are alive at this extraordinary moment in the human journey. Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude for each and every one of you who are joining our session today, I'm delighted to introduce our 5th monthly session, honoring one of the great spirits and pioneers of our time, Stan Grof, who, as all of you know by now, has been a pioneer in psychedelic research, in the development of the holotropic breathwork technique, in explorations of the human psyche that went way beyond Freud and Jung, and who has really empowered people all over the world to explore the frontiers of the psyche, the frontiers of consciousness. And I think it's also worth noting that yesterday in the New York Times, there was a headline saying, the coming psychedelic revolution. Everything is in a circle. And Stan was there with Albert Hofmann and others in the 1950s and 60s that did the original research into LSD, and more broadly by others into psilocybin and other psychedelic substances. Those were all repressed by governments around the world once they got the notion that the people were actually getting liberated. And yet, after decades of repression, the efficacy of psychedelics, according to the New York Times, particularly psilocybin and ecstasy, are proving to be so effective, particularly with post-traumatic stress disorder. But now they're discovering a range of psycho-emotional issues that even as cannabis is being legalized now in state after state and country after country around the world, the New York Times is now predicting that psychedelics are on their way back into more general therapeutic use. And Stan was one of the pioneers that ushered in this entire field. And that's one of the reasons, one of the many reasons that Humanity Rising wanted to celebrate him in his 90th year. So that's our program today. And I'd like to turn it over to Susan Hess-Loger, who's an award-winning director, as you all know, has done an amazing documentary on Stan and Brigitte Grof, and has really been the mastermind and the heart and the soul of this real tribute to Stan. So Susan, I want to celebrate you and acknowledge everything that you've done. It's been one of the most heartwarming and wonderful series of sessions that we've had in 246 days on Humanity Rising. So thank you and welcome.
Oh, thank you, Jim. It's really been wonderful working with you to bring this to everybody. So the tribute for me has been wonderful because I worked with Stan and Brigitte for a period of about 7 years to produce this documentary. And that was quite an education. But through inviting so many of these visionaries who worked with Stan over the course of his long 60-year career, I've gained such a deeper understanding of his work and the impact it's had on these people and how it shaped their journey going forward. So today, what we're sharing is archetypal astrology. And that was something that Rick Tarnas and Stan developed while at Esalen together. And you speak about this period of, you described it as a circle, coming back to sort of the 60s and this interest in psychedelics. Well, I'm sure that our guest today will be able to explain that through the archetypal astrological lens in terms of planetary transits and how certain things that are introduced in one moment take a period of time to come back around into the culture. So anyway, that's exciting to share today. So before I introduce Stan and Brigitte, I would like to give a brief biography of Brigitte Grof. She is a psychologist, a psychotherapist, and an artist. In 1986, she went to the Esalen Institute to attend a month-long holotropic breathwork seminar with the Grofs. And eventually she participated in a 3-year training in Switzerland. Since 1989, she has facilitated holotropic breathwork in Europe. She currently has a private psychotherapy practice in Wiesbaden, Germany. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. And she and Stan have been married since 2016. And then in 2020, the Grofs launched the Grof Legacy Training for working with holotropic states. So welcome, Brigitte and Stan. It's so lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you.
So
Thank
Stan,
you so much.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, first of all, I thank you so much, Jim, yourself, for giving this opportunity for me to have a birthday that lacks 6 months. And also celebrating with me really wonderful close friends. So this is a very special treat for me. Thank you so much. I would like to start something that I started with all these previous ubiquities. I have to say that 3 years ago I had a stroke. It didn't hit my paralysis. I don't think it hit my minds, but certainly it is quite much my speech. And one of the things that I'm also asking Brigitte to help me in these kinds of situations when I ran into some kind of expression that she helps me. And it's great to have all this spent with her, with this, you know.
Yeah, it's been lovely. Brigitte is there.
Again, all of us who are teaching today, you know, thank you so much. You know, I know that all of us really coordinating this whole development of both psychedelics and holotropic psychology and so on, you know. So it's a great deal for me, wonderful for me to see them and spend this time in a very close connection. We don't see that much, you know, close and talking about what are important things for us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan and Jim and everybody who's joining. Stan is so happy about this happening, and me too.
Well, it's always a joy to see you both and to come together and for these tributes. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the guests today. So our first guest, well, they're all going to join us at once, but I'll introduce them each separately. So Becca Tarnas, Ph.D., is a scholar, artist, and editor of Archetypal, the Journal of Archetypal Cosmology. She received her doctorate in philosophy and religion from the California Institute of Integral Studies, and her dissertation was titled The Back of Beyond, the Red Books of C.G. Jung and J.R.R. Tolkien. Her research interests include depth psychology, literature, philosophy, and the ecological imagination. She teaches at both Pacifica Graduate Institute and at CIIS, and she's the author of the book Journey to the Imaginal Realm, A Reader's Guide to J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. So welcome, Becca, and it's just lovely to have her join us here today. Another of our guests today is Renn Butler, and Renn studied with Stan Grof and Richard Tarnas at the Esalen Institute in California beginning in 1980, and was certified as a holotropic breathwork facilitator in 1989. He offers workshops in British Columbia and abroad, as well as archetypal astrology consultations with clients around the world. Renn is the author of 3 books, Pathways to Wholeness, about astrology and psychedelic experiences, The Archetypal Universe, which focuses on dreams, and Oh Goddess, about relationships. Renn has a BA in English and religious studies and worked part-time as a healthcare worker with physically, mentally, and emotionally challenged adults for over 30 years. Welcome, Renn. And now Will Keepin, Ph.D., is the co-founder of the Satyana Institute and founder of Gender Reconciliation International, a mathematical physicist. Keepin presented testimony to European and Australian parliaments in the United States House of Representatives and became a whistleblower in nuclear science policy. He has trained in transpersonal psychology and facilitated holotropic breathwork since the 1990s. Will is also a fellow of the Findhorn Foundation, an adjunct faculty at Holy Names University, and an author of several books with very long titles and co-author. So I'm going to skip that so we can just say welcome to all of you. And if you unmute yourselves, we can all say hello to Brigitte and Stan before we hand it over to Becca to begin.
Hi, great to be here.
Good to be here. Wonderful to see you, Stan.
Happy birthday, Will. And yeah, sorry that we lost the part of it. You know, we had the meaning with.
Yes, I know. No, that's great.
You know about that, and
yeah, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much.
It's a privilege to be here again.
Yeah. Well. So let's just jump right in. Becca, I'm going to hand it over to you. And I should mention that Becca has been a professor of mine during my completion of a master's program at CIIS. And she is such an amazing teacher and so eloquent in her description of archetypes and the planetary transits and the forces that impact us. So I'm thrilled to hand it over to you, Becca.
Oh, thank you, Susan and Jim, for creating this beautiful experience. And it's such a joy to be able to contribute some small offering in honor of Stan with your birthday coming up. And Stan has been a presence in my life from before I was even born. So it really feels so wonderful to be able to be here and honor you. So I just want to offer a brief introduction of what archetypes are and how archetypes relate to planets and how we can use that correspondence to understand really what astrology can tell us about humanity, about our own psyches, and about the cosmos itself. And for a psychologically oriented audience, I think a helpful place to begin when talking about archetypes is by looking at how Carl Gustav Jung defined archetypes. Because in Jung's work, he came to recognize that there were these principles within the human psyche that seemed to structure and shape and provide a primordial foundation to the psyche. And the Jungian archetypes are known by such names as the hero, the shadow, the divine child, the great mother, the anima, the animus, the wise old man. We know them as these primordial figures, these psychological archetypes. And he recognized that our complexes and psychological experiences seem to be patterned by these particular archetypes. But Jung didn't invent archetypes. He didn't discover them independently. There has been a long lineage of what archetypes are. And Jung recognized that we needed to turn towards myth to really understand the psyche. And the reason we turn towards myth is because myth tells us the stories of the gods and goddesses of the ancient pantheons, the deities of the ancient mythic imagination. And we can see these archetypal pantheons in cultures all around the world. We recognize them in the Greek and the Roman mythic stories, but also the Norse and the Mayan and the Yoruba and the Vedic and so many others. These families of archetypal principles. But the person who really articulated what these deities are, not in mythic terms, but in philosophical terms, was Plato. And Plato articulated them as he described them as forms, as ideas that dwelt in a transcendent realm, and that these forms or these archetypes, they were what gave shape to the world around us. So when we, for example, we see a horse, we recognize this particular horse to be such because it participates in the ideal form of horseness, horse with a capital H, or a tree. Every tree species participates in the archetypal form of tree. It is a tree to the extent that it participates in that form. Or one example that I think illustrates what an archetype is very well is that of beauty, because beauty is something that we can recognize in so many different forms. We can see the beauty of a blossoming flower, or of the sunrise, or of our beloved's face. We see beauty in so many different particular forms, but we know it's beauty. And from the Platonic perspective, it is each of these different particulars is beautiful to the extent that it participates in that archetype of beauty, beauty with a capital B, this transcendent form of beauty. And we can trace the lineage of an understanding of what archetypes are, or really what is the relationship between universals and particulars. How do they relate to one another? And we can trace that through the whole history of the Western philosophical tradition. And it's been given many different forms. And so Plato's student, Aristotle, articulated a different kind of relationship between these universals and particulars. While Plato saw them as transcendent and as dwelling in some other ideal realm, but participating in this material realm. For Aristotle, he saw these universals instead as abstractions, that we look out at the world and we abstract, and we look at the many different trees and we recognize that archetypal form of tree, but that it's not dwelling somewhere else. It's immanent. Instead of transcendent, it's immanent in the trees. The universals are a part of the material world, but we, with our intellectual capacity, abstract them. And so there's this back and forth that plays out through many different philosophers' ideas. That's really that conversation going on still for more than 2,000 years between Plato and Aristotle. Are they transcendent or are they immanent? And maybe perhaps they are both. So when we come back to Jung, he felt for much of his career that these psychological archetypes were only within the human psyche, that they were interior, but that they didn't go beyond our interior psychological experience, until this pesky little phenomenon kept coming up, and that was synchronicity. And we've probably all experienced synchronicities at different points in our lives, those moments where you're having an internal experience and then something happens in the external world that so perfectly mirrors what's going on for you internally that it's uncanny. How could that possibly just happen by chance? It's as though the world is speaking to you. And Jung gave this classic example of one of his patients was having a very difficult time breaking out of her rational Cartesian perspective, and she could explain away everything. His treatment with her wasn't progressing. And one day in a session, she was explaining to him a dream that she'd had the night before, where someone gave her a piece of jewelry, and it was a golden scarab. And at that moment, as she's describing the dream, Jung hears this tapping on the window, and that he went over to the window and looked out, and tapping at the window was this little rose chafer beetle. It was the closest species to a scarab that lives in that northern latitude in Switzerland. And he opened the window and he brought the beetle inside. And as his patient was finishing talking about her dream, he handed her the beetle and said, "Here is your scarab." And in that moment, her worldview shattered, it changed. And that what he recognized as well, not only was there this synchronicity, the appearance in the physical world of exactly what she had been describing from her interior experience, but that there was an archetypal core here. Because when we look towards myth, we see that the scarab symbolizes rebirth. And with the arrival of this golden scarab that he handed her, it symbolized a rebirth of her own psychological development and her relationship to the world. It was a rebirth of her worldview. And so we usually think of synchronicities as something that happen unexpectedly, that they're rare, but there is one type of synchronicity that doesn't seem to be that way. And that synchronicity is one that we see playing out every day. And that is a synchronicity between the unfolding of events on Earth, human events, and the movements and positions of the planets in our solar system. And astrologers have found that every planet in our solar system corresponds with a particular archetypal principle. And that the names given to our planets, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, that these names reflect the mythic archetypal characteristics associated. And whether we look to the unfolding of events through history with what are called world transits, or we look to the natal chart, which is where the planets were at the moment that you were born. And we see a correspondence with how those meanings correlate to the unfolding of your individual life. Or what are called personal transits, when the world transits continue to make relationships to the positions of the planets in the birth chart. This is what are called personal transits. And we see different phases of an individual's life unfolding in correspondence with the archetypal meanings associated with the planets that are being activated at that time. And something that's important to recognize about these astrological correlations is that they are correlations. It does not seem that there's any physical cause between the positions of the planets and the unfolding of events on Earth or in human lives. Those correspondences, these archetypal correlations, are too nuanced and subtle and poetic and personal and changeable to be caused in some physical way by some kind of gravitational force, for example. And so we have to look to a different kind of causality. One actually that Aristotle introduced, what he called formal and final causality, where we can understand the way that the universal, the archetype, shapes the unfolding of an event, not in a physically caused form, but rather in an archetypally caused form. And we can see this underlying patterning where there is an interconnection between the movements within the largest, our largest systems in the cosmos and our innermost experiences, that underlying all of that is this archetypal ground of being. So we can especially recognize this in world transits, where there are different epochs or periods in history that align with the return of different planets coming back together. So, for example, when the planets Uranus and Pluto come into alignment, we see unfolding at the time of those alignments great revolutionary periods. The decade of the 1960s, there was a conjunction of the planets Uranus and Pluto that were right next to each other. And the archetype associated with the planet Uranus is that of awakening, liberation, freedom, rebellion, change, disruption. And that of Pluto is the depths, the underworld, deep transformation, power, the drive, the instincts. And so there's this awakening and unleashing of that instinctual drive that we see correlate with Uranus-Pluto periods, whether that's the 1960s or the French Revolutionary period or our most recent decade, because there was an alignment between Uranus and Pluto from 2007 through the end of 2020. And I think we felt it at the beginning of 2021 as well. Or a different archetypal principle, Saturn with Pluto. Now, we have Pluto as the same archetypal principle, but Saturn brings in constriction, constraint, challenges, difficulty, pain, suffering, endings, mortality, death. And we see correlating with Saturn-Pluto periods very trying eras in human history, whether that's the beginning of World War I or World War II or 9/11 or the Vietnam War or the COVID-19 pandemic that we've all been experiencing. That alignment of Saturn-Pluto what peaked last year, and it's with us through the end of this year, 2021. So there's many other different alignments of these 10 planets in our solar system. They make 45 different combinations, but we can see them manifest in the world transits in this more historical way that I've been talking about. We also can see them unfold in individual human lives with the natal chart and the personal transits. And archetypal astrology provides an extraordinary tool and practice for our own psychospiritual development, because it can show us, just by looking at the chart, what are the complexes that we're working with? What are our struggles? Where is our shadow hidden? What are we not seeing about ourselves that the chart can show us? And what are our gifts? What are our proclivities that we can develop and bring forward? How can we participate in these archetypal principles and bring them forward in an extraordinary dance between our inner world and the outer cosmological macrocosm? So I will end there, and I look forward to hearing what my fellow panelists have to share on this topic.
Well, Becca, that was amazing. And I want to mention that you now are offering a training in archetypal astrology through your website. And I've asked the folks that are helping us today to make that available to the panelists, but essentially beccatarnas.com, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you also offer astrological consultations, which I have had, and I highly recommend that. Mm. And I should also mention that, Becca, you read, you're the voice of the audiobook for Stan's The Way of the Psychonaut, volumes 1 and 2, which was a lot of reading, I'm pretty sure. And that's also the name of our documentary, which I forgot to mention, thewayofthepsychonaut.com. Anyway, so Stan and Brigitte, perhaps you have something to say to Becca before we transition to Renn.
Becca, what an amazing lecture. you know, how to explain something that's very difficult. A lot of people have difficulties with difficulty of the relationship between planets and experiences, and what synchronicity is involved. Mm-hmm. This is a really difficult way it's explaining, and there's just a beautiful thing. I don't, probably less than an hour.
Yeah, 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing, really amazing. And I hope that people will understand, you know, why actually Rick, you know, at the end of Psychonaut, that a really great representation of both synchronicity and astrology, you know.
Yes.
And again, thanks for your book. We did spend about maybe with 10 actors before we're trying to get, you know, whom we wanted, and it was impossible. It was very difficult, you know. You have to get together psychedelics, chemistry, philosophy, astrology, you know. So you are able to do it, and to exhibit great voice.
Yes, you could hear.
I watch it myself, you know.
You could hear when these actors were reading part of the book, you could hear that they didn't have any clue what they were reading, you know. It was just totally wrong. And so we turned down one after the other, although it was the pandemic, it would have been great to have the book. And then suddenly we thought of you, you know, and we thought, oh my God, we should ask Becca. And then when you sent us a little part where you were reading, it was just like your voice and your being was just like a crystal clear mountain spring, and so beautiful. And we are listening to it all the time in the car, and you are just so beautiful from inside and outside, and so talented, and such a gift to the world. So, and I knew you when you were in the belly of your mom. Remember?
Yes, when
Probably not.
when Susan said you came out to Esalen in 1986, I was like, oh,
yes,
just before I came into the world.
Yes, I made you a painting that every child is a walking star.
I remember.
That was for your birth, yes. So wonderful.
Just one more thing, you know, people are always saying, you know, Stan, it has a male voice, you know, there's to have a male actor in it.
For the audiobook.
And this is ideal, of course.
It was such an extraordinary experience to be able to record your audiobook. You know, we did it in 9 solid days down in San Diego.
800 pages in 9 days. Unbelievable. You're a genius. You are a genius.
Oh, it was amazing to be able to do. I mean, I felt like I was getting to drink in this rich, nourishing nectar of all of your research. And my favorite parts to read were really where the storytelling came forward and describing the basic perinatal matrices, which I know Renn will be talking about, and just really being able to live into it. So it's one of the most valuable experiences I've had, just being able to read every word of that out loud, and is really such an honor. So thank you for asking me, and that we got to subvert by having a young female voice speak your words.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, okay, so now, lovely. Thank you. That was beautiful, Becca. And Renn, I'm going to bring you in. And I should say that I met Renn as a facilitator for a breathwork workshop that was offered in San Francisco, and where we screened the film to a small group of people. And then I also had a consultation with Renn, who offers consultations, and it was amazing. And I used your book, The Archetypal Universe, during my course with Becca Tarnas at CIIS to help make sense of planetary transits. So and studied with Renn online over the course of many Saturdays until my workload got too heavy. So I am thrilled to invite Renn, who brings such an amazing perspective of the archetypal astrology as it relates to the perinatal matrices.
Great to be here. Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Jim. Really wonderful to be here with so many friends and colleagues. So I have the honor of presenting about 65 years of Stan's research in 15 minutes. So I'll have to fast forward here a little bit. Okay, let's see. Share my screen. Can you see that? Okay, great. So thank you for everything you have contributed so far. I think your greatest contribution, Stan, is in documenting a proven and legitimate pathway to psychospiritual healing and awakening within the context of an academic discipline, transpersonal psychology, without creating a religion. Very impressive accomplishment. Many people have said, and I think I first heard it from Rick Tarnas, that you're the most deserving person of a Nobel Prize that hasn't received one yet. So I'm sure some of us watching today will be alive to see that happen. Just a super brief intro to me. That's me on the left, a Mormon family. This is before Esalen. And that's a few years later after Esalen. So Esalen had a pretty big effect on our lives, as you can see. So my first memory of Stan is in the Esalen office sometime during the summer of 1980. Rick introduced us and Stan gave me a big warm hug, which I'll never forget. So many of you have heard Stan and Rick talk about this. Psychedelics, when used responsibly, Stan believes can play a similar role in psychology and psychotherapy as the microscope in biology and the telescope in astronomy. I love that expression. Stan also came to see in his work with Rick Tarnas that archetypal astrology functions as a Rosetta Stone of the psyche. It is the only system that can successfully predict both the content and timing of experiences encountered in non-ordinary states of consciousness in experiential psychotherapy. Stan and his colleagues tried for years to find a diagnostic technique that could predict the variability of sessions within an individual's sequence of sessions, and also differences in experiences in a group of people who do LSD on the same day. And when they finally found archetypal astrology, it truly was a Rosetta Stone discovery. There's a picture of Rick. Now, many of you are familiar with Freud's model of the psyche. Our consciousness represents the tip of this large iceberg, and below that is the subconscious, unconscious, with many repressed and disowned elements of our psyches. However, Stan's work required the addition of two additional domains to the area that Freud was familiar with. Here's the ordinary ego consciousness at the top, and this amazing map was designed by Rick Tarnas. This, to me, is the most incredible diagram. It contains, kind of in a summary form, all that we know about the human psyche, or the most important points. I mean, in a very condensed way. So then there's the personal unconscious, and this is the extent of the iceberg that Freud was referring to. It only went as far as here. So the additional domains are the perinatal that Stan discovered, that's confrontation with birth and death, and then the transpersonal realms. And we can see that astrological archetypes are correlated with all of the experiences from these various levels, as we'll look at. So after looking at personally conducting 3,000 LSD sessions and having access to the records of 2,000 more, Stan eventually extrapolated from this data a new cartography of the psyche. And he found that when people's self-exploration begins, they will begin to experience unprocessed emotions and experiences from infancy to the present. This is the biographical layer of the psyche. And most of you listening would be familiar with this material. This is material you would get quite a bit of sympathy for in a traditional talk therapy session. However, Stan found that there was one category that was missed in all the major psychological schools, and that was leftover traces from serious illnesses, operations, or accidents. And the most significant of those were ones that involved a threat to life and a threat to breathing, or a threat to bodily integrity, such as losing a limb, something like that. So when self-exploration continues, people begin to have a very powerful, multi-leveled, intense encounter with birth and death, our human mortality, also experiences of rebirth and transcendence. And these tend to emerge in 4 distinct clusters of experience, which Stan termed the basic perinatal matrices, or BPMs. Each one of these BPMs is a powerful merging of obstetric elements from nature, as well as collective, karmic, archetypal, and spiritual themes that are correlated with that matrix. And we'll see how that happens. And then deeper than the perinatal realm is a vast domain for which Stan coined the term transpersonal. Stan coined that term in 1968. He was one of the co-founders of transpersonal psychology. I won't read these, but you can come back and look at this. Jung was aware of some of these and was like a pioneer. He was considered the first transpersonal psychologist, though he didn't use that term himself. Jung was especially interested in ancestral, racial, and collective memories, and also archetypal and mythological sequences and archetypal terrains. So Jung was aware of many, but not all of these areas. So the perinatal layer of the psyche. So I put this together, the Grof Tarnas perinatal sequence, based on their incredible work together. Rick, I believe, deserves a Nobel Prize as well for his work. So just as a brief summary, and then we'll look a little more deeply at these. The first perinatal matrix based on the intrauterine existence, and it's overlayered with experiences of heaven and paradise. And this is connected with the archetype Neptune. Rick Tarnas was able to recognize. And then the early stage of labor with the cervix still closed and a sense of no exit, entrapment, and encagement. This is connected with the archetype of hell and with Saturn. So these experiences are more likely to surface during powerful Saturn transits, or transits to our natal Saturn. This is an amazing help in deep experiential psychotherapy, especially with first-time clients. We would try to minimize these kind of Saturnian experiences for people the first time, and also for very depressed or very paranoid people, or patients, clients, or people that have had major breaches of trust in their life experience. Then the dynamic stage of labor is the basis of BPM 3. Here the cervix is open and the fetus is being pressed through the narrow birth canal by very powerful uterine contractions. This is connected with the archetype of purgatory and the death rebirth struggle, and with the connected with Pluto, the archetype of Pluto. And then finally, the explosive liberation, crowning, and exiting the birth canal and the early situation in the delivery room, Grof calls BPM 4. And this is connected with the archetype of rebirth and transcendence and with Uranus. So the archetypal components of the BPMs form their deepest layer. We know this because the sessions of people born by elective cesarean section will still tend to be organized around the transpersonal components of the BPMs: ancestral, racial, collective, karmic, and mythological elements. These will be correlated with their transits, just as they are with people not born by elective cesarean, although without the fetal elements. And their psychology might be somewhat closer to Jung's understanding. They would still have the historical, the archetypal elements of these BPMs, but without the powerful obstetric elements. So Rick describes the perinatal layer as a multidimensional nexus or transduction point between the personal and transpersonal layers of consciousness. It is the in-between layer between the personal and the transpersonal. Perinatal experiences are where the universal consciousness incarnates itself into individual form, where the transpersonal becomes human, the divine is made flesh, we could say. So our birth is where the vast forces, elements, vectors, we could say, in the transpersonal realm come to bear in the incarnation of a human soul, the birth and gestation and so on. Conversely, during the process of deep self-exploration, the perinatal layer acts as the bridge and gateway between our individual awareness and the transpersonal realms. So coming from the other direction, in deep self-exploration, we begin by processing childhood memories often, and then that deepens into the perinatal matrices, and those function as an opening or a gateway, a doorway to the transpersonal realms, the numinous experiences, divine consciousness, the archetypal realms, and so on. Every minute obstetric detail of our births is the result of transpersonal elements, these which are being embodied in the world of form so they can be experienced, processed, and enjoyed. As these perinatal memories within us unpack, as we can finally face them for the first time, we realize that every nuance of our births and our incarnation is being fed by influences from the transpersonal realms, from other lifetimes, from ancestral memories, racial memories, collective memories, archetypes, and so on. So during negative experiences, BPM 2 and BPM 3, we might experience this as karma somehow, as having to suffer and pay off unfinished business from the past of our other lifetimes, of our families, our race, or our species. But during the positive experiences of BPM 1 and 4, we gain access to a higher perspective. We can see every detail of our incarnation as the expression of a fantastic divine play. The cosmic creative principle seems to crave variety of experience, and in transcendent states, we realize that there is only one protagonist in the universe having all the experiences. Aspects and transits will reveal important information about our incarnation and involution, moving into matter, and conversely, they can illuminate essential themes and timing of our awakening and evolution out of matter back into the universal consciousness, or out of our identification with matter back into the universal consciousness. So a little more about the BPMs. So BPM 1, so blissful oceanic feelings, a sense of no boundaries, feelings of cosmic unity, perception of higher meaning. This is one of Stan's paintings where he identified with the fetus in a state of blissful union with the entire cosmos. Through symbolic logic, very important term that Stan introduces, images of space or of the ocean share with the intrauterine state the quality of no boundaries. And so we can identify with our, ourselves in the good womb situation, and this can open out into images of space or of the ocean. And this is one of Stan's paintings called The Oceanic Womb. Both of these, Stan believes, are from sessions in the late 1950s when he had transiting Neptune trine his natal Pluto. There can also be toxic womb experiences or disturbances of intrauterine life. And some of the negative characteristics associated with Neptune seem to be related to unresolved disturbances in this period of gestation. Now, this is from a holotropic breathwork session in the lap of the goddess during a transit of Neptune conjunct her natal moon, Sylvina Heath. Love this painting. And then another breathwork session, Kundalini Mother by Katia Soliani, an Italian artist, during a world transit of Uranus conjunct Neptune. It's very interesting that Becca was born, I think, in December 87. That's the same year I met Brigitte. And less than a year after that, I met Bill for the first time, mid-October 1988 at the International Transpersonal Association conference in Santa Rosa. That was also the year that I think that Stan and Christina began the breathwork training. So very magical time. Now, I've had some artists, I've commissioned some artists to draw these perinatal drawings to help show the relationship between the archetypes and the BPM. So this is Jupiter, Neptune, Jupiter in the womb. I call this the womb with a view, painting by Olena Provencher. So Neptune spiritualizes whatever it touches. It works to bring it to a higher, more spiritual level. Acting on Jupiter, it will spiritualize our idea of what constitutes success in life. And when in its resolved form, we would have a Neptunian valuation of our connection with other people, with nature, and with the cosmic creative principle. And the resolved form of Jupiter here would be, we would value our ability to be of service, to give, and to contribute. So from the individual side, the experience of being absorbed into union with divine consciousness, existence in heaven or paradise, Atman Brahman, Buddha nature, the Tao, Unio Mystica, harmony of the spheres, the sacred marriage are some of the experiences people talk about as they're having BPM-1 experiences. Feelings of oceanic or melted ecstasy are a powerful healing threshold in psychotherapy, Stan observed. This, in a sense, is the goal of transpersonal psychotherapy, is to reach these states. From the transpersonal side, states of cosmic unity and wholeness before the process of involution and incarnation has really begun. There's still a union between the consciousness of the fetus and the universal consciousness. The cosmic creative principle seems to have an overflowing love it wants to share with someone beyond itself. The creative passion of a master artist, the insatiable curiosity of a scientist, or cosmic boredom and loneliness. These are some of the motives that the mystics attribute, including Stan's own experiences, to why does the cosmic creative principle create the physical universe or universes. And I highly recommend this book, The Cosmic Game. I consider it the book of the millennium. Now, Saturn and BPM-2, no exit, feelings of compression, constriction, and hopelessness, lack of meaning or connection. This is another one of Stan's drawings from a high-dose LSD session with transiting Saturn opposition his natal sun. Experiences of loss of paradise. This is from Stan as well, where the uterine contractions are experienced as an attack by a monstrous octopus. And existence in hell from various cultures, identification with the victims of all times and places, like the Jews in the concentration camps, African Americans in the slave trade, First Nations people dying of genocide, Arabs massacred by the Mongols, and many other collective memories. This is from a breathwork session by a Finnish artist, Tauno Leinonen, experience of BPM2. He identified with an old woman wandering in a landscape of eternal pain and loneliness. And he had transiting Saturn square his natal sun. Now, it's interesting, Jean-Paul Sartre, this was an amazing drawing by Olena Preventure again, in the no exit stage of birth. In 1935, Sartre had a poorly managed and unresolved mescaline session which left him with acute feelings of anxiety and depression. His philosophy of existentialism can be seen in many ways as an expression of Stan's BPM2. And it's interesting that it was during his Saturn return, he had transiting Saturn conjunct his natal moon Saturn conjunction. Venus in the BPM2, that would be one way of looking at Venus-Saturn aspects and transits, though of course there are many positive qualities of Venus-Saturn as I, Brigitte, Becca, and many of us watching can attest. This was from Eva Ursini drew that one. So from the individual side, states of separation and disconnection from the universal consciousness, entering the realm of time and materiality, mortality and finitude. Hell, the suffering of Tantalus or Prometheus, the dark night of the soul. Saturn is closely connected with the hylotropic or moving toward matter impulse in our psyches, connected with involution, moving into states of constriction, contraction, and materiality. The suffering of BPM2 and BPM3 forms the basis of the unhealthy, paranoid, and fearful elements of our egos. And this is the part that dies, that Stan observed during the process of ego death. This is what dies, the paranoid, fearful parts of our egos. Now, from the transpersonal side, the act of cosmic creation requires plays of opposites such as light, dark, pleasure, pain, etc. Through a process of self-forgetting and partitioning, the universal principle differentiates out parts of its own being into separate units of consciousness which can interact with each other and with the divine principle in the countless dramas of incarnation. So Pluto and BPM3, confrontations with the shadow side of human nature, intense driving pressures and activation of powerful energies, a sense of there being a finite amount of suffering, and feelings of moving toward light at the end of the tunnel. There can be a sense of titanic fight and aggression, and explosive discharges of aggression are very common in sessions of people working through BPM3 under Pluto transits. And we need to allow that to happen. Stan was able to show there's a finite amount of this in the individual psyche, so it is very beneficial to let it come forth. Now, sexual energies, which because of the suffocation in labor tend to have a sadomasochistic component. This is interesting, this sort of urge to be confined. It's very suggestive of the perinatal experience. Now, this was Sergei Martin, a Russian artist I commissioned to draw this. Freud, born with Sun square Pluto, similar to Stan's Sun conjunct Pluto, was interested in the force of sexuality in early human development. Freud saw the pervading signs of sexual symbolism in many areas of life. When asked about his own cigars, he famously responded, "Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar." Many decades later, Stan, born with Sun conjunct Pluto, discovered that some of the most powerful and problematic sexual feelings in the human psyche derive from an even earlier stage of development during birth, as we just mentioned. I'm sure you can see this. This cigar feels more suspicious all the time. So people facing BPM3 during Pluto transits can confront demonic archetypes, or what the Buddhists call wrathful deities. It's interesting that the artist H.R. Giger, a close friend of Stan's, was born with Pluto square Mars Saturn. We would expect these kind of themes to emerge in someone's art with that aspect, or someone who goes deep into their psyche. Now, people can also face scatological experiences. Nausea, projectile vomiting is very common in BPM3 sessions. And then finally, people can have a sense of passing through purifying fire, what Stan terms pyrocatharsis. The fire has a magical quality. It can consume whatever is rotten and corrupt in our souls and prepare us for rebirth. This is from an ayahuasca session. She had transiting Pluto conjunct her natal sun. So connected with BPM3 is a type of ecstasy which Stan calls volcanic or Dionysian type of ecstasy. And it's no exaggeration to call these kind of BPM3 experiences in sessions volcanic. And it's very important to create a safe space to let these energies and emotions unpack. Identification with blasting rockets. From the individual side, the death rebirth struggle of the ego, as we are forced to face and take responsibility for the entire range of human shadow emotions. We can identify with both victims and perpetrators in our sessions, purgatory, volcanic ecstasy, and as I said, a sense of a finite amount of suffering that will eventually end. From the transpersonal side, the endless processes of cosmic change of Pluto, the unleashing of powerful energies and emotions in order to thicken the plot of the cosmic drama and keep it interesting and entertaining. It seems to be one of the deeper motivations for why is there the Pluto archetype in the universe, is to keep the cosmic drama moving and interesting. Now, Pluto's driving energies, such as during the suffering of birth or in acted out encounters in human life, which deeply wound us and send us further from the divine source, can be hylotropic, moving toward matter. They send us further from our connection with our true identity, which is the universal consciousness. But Pluto's actions can also be powerfully holotropic, moving toward wholeness, such as during the dramatic releases of energy and emotion during supervised breathwork and psychedelic sessions, as our inner traumas are unpacked and released. This widens the pathway in our psyches back to the universal consciousness. And again, this is the goal of psychotherapy and Stan's understanding, is to open or widen the pathway back to the divine or numinous or universal consciousness. Now, finally, Uranus and BPM4, a profound sense of decompression, opening, and awakening, ecstatic feelings of rebirth, renewal, redemption, and forgiveness, feelings of planetary citizenship and universal sisterhood and brotherhood. Intrinsic human values. And this Stan, like Jung, is very optimistic about the results of psychotherapy. If we remove the arrow of suffering, is the way the Buddhists see it, compassion follows automatically. People get in touch with the good side of human nature automatically. So moving toward divine light is very common here. Sort of angelic archetypal presences, images of ravishing displays of light, peacock feathers and spectra patterns inside of giant halls and cathedrals that depict the opening and decompression of space as the infant leaves the confining birth canal. The images of the end of wars or revolutions, or discovery of medicine that will benefit both sides in a conflict. This is about the period I was just describing, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Great Velvet Revolution during that Uranus-Neptune conjunction. Rebirth experience being held in the hands of the Great Mother Goddess. We can identify with the death and rebirth of deities such as Osiris, Dionysus, Persephone, Christ, Inanna, and others. We can feel a reunion with the Great Mother Goddess personified as Isis, Demeter, Lakshmi, Parvati, Mary, Tara, Kuan Yin, or with God, a sense of reunion with God or the divine in a more abstract form, such as radiant light during powerful Uranus transits, sort of escaping the attachment to the phenomenal realm and sudden entering into the vision of the archetypal realm, the first causes. So Surrender by Anne Hoivik from Norway, a breathwork session which involved an experience of crucifixion and explosive transcendence of boundaries during the transition of BPM 3 to BPM 4. She had transiting Saturn opposition her natal sun. This is one of my favorites from Stan Peacock, Great Mother Goddess. He passed through the purifying fire of BPM 3 and into the blessed realm of rebirth in BPM 4 during a transit of Uranus Pluto of the 60s square his natal Venus. So from the individual side, sense of freedom, breakthroughs, rebirth, awakening, the impulse to rebel against our inner repression and face our unconscious material in safe settings. It's just, I can't take any more. I've tried everything else. I can't hold things in. I'm just going to let go and let things come out. Ecstatic breakthroughs back into the universal consciousness beyond the fear of death. From the transpersonal side, this is the holotropic force moving toward wholeness, which pulls our consciousness out of its immersion in material form and back toward divine wholeness and self-awakening. Reborn deities and the cosmic midwife archetype. These archetypes, these planetary archetypes, though they have Greco-Roman names, are by no means masculine or feminine. They encompass both feminine and masculine components here. Uranus is just as much a feminine archetype as a masculine one. I love this. This is a BPM 4 hybrid drawing. We use Stan's BPM 4 infant here, and then Eva Ursini drew the mother. I love this one, beloved. Now, just Becca alluded to the world transits and the Saturn-Pluto conjunction and the Saturn-Uranus. They are in square right now, Saturn-Uranus, and there's this incredible interplay right now between people's fear of being constricted, having their freedom taken away, and the sense of freedom. Saturn, BPM 2, and Uranus, BPM 4. These perinatal matrices help us to understand the world transits and add additional, deeper meanings. And this sense of, freedom being taken away by wearing a mask, reminds us of perinatal choking. That's something that I realized, and Brigitte sort of independently had that insight, that the vaccines are kind of a plot to steal our freedom, and also the sense that the lockdown is a loss of freedom, and we all crave the state of freedom and returning to this more open state. And then finally, just Rick, this amazing sentiment from 1997, patriarchy is the 5,000-year birth canal of the Great Mother Goddess. There's a kind of overarching perinatal experience for our species. We're in a death rebirth struggle of our species, and we're at the crowning moment, but we don't know if we're going to make it or not. There's so much pressure pushing us toward that but it's a very dangerous time too. And then while he made that comment at the Cycles and Symbols conference, he projected this image of the cosmic mother. I love this. So I just want to mention that we started a YouTube channel, Archetypal News Network, which you can check out, ANN, with regular content on the world transits. And there's also my information about my course. Thank you for honoring the work of Stan and Rick with us.
Thank you, Renn. Thank you. Yeah, that was just beautiful. I'm looking for Stan and Brigitte.
You're muted.
Oh. I don't think I'm muted. Can
I'm
everybody
muted.
hear me?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Apologies.
Yeah. So anyway, well, thank you very much for that. That was such a beautiful presentation of the relationship of the planetary archetypes and the birth process. And I loved how you wrapped that up with the imagery about where we're at right now. I thought that was really powerful because I've been struggling to understand the resistance to mask wearing, or in the United States right now, it's practically half the population doesn't want to believe that we had a legitimate election. And, quite a chunk of the population doesn't want to get vaccinated and are violently opposed to measures to preserve their own safety. So that was very helpful in understanding that.
Awesome. Thanks.
And again, thank you very much. It's a beautiful representation of what's happening in psychedelic sessions and astrology. And I think people, if they haven't seen already before, they will, I think, get Zen, what you have showed today. I don't think there's another book actually that combines kind of knowledge of psychedelic sessions and holotropic breathwork, like yourself, and archetypes. We probably don't have it until Rick would create a book. We have so far doing it in sessions.
Seminars.
We were in
seminars.
Yeah, talking about the psyche and cosmos. So we have seen it all, and we have some of them on videos and so on. But there's really no book of this kind, and this is why we always refer to your book, because it finds that kind of a combination. So it's quite amazing, and thank you so much. And I hope that both Becca and you will understand that people will understand that we would love to have them in our training.
Becca and Renn.
Yeah, we will be, and we're very honored. Thank you. And I just want to say your work and Rick's work has been the light of my life, and it's been an incredibly liberating force in my life. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I want to pass it off to Will. I'm sorry, Brigitte, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
It's just one sentence. Renn, when I listened to you, I thought it was so amazing. We were both work scholars at Esalen in 1986, and we never would have thought that we would sit in this event together, also with Will and Becca. So it's been just an unbelievable circle that life has taken, and we're all so dedicated to Stan and Stan's work. And now here we are. What a trip. It's amazing.
What a long, strange trip it's been. but only strange. Marvelous.
No, wonderful.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much. This was great.
Welcome.
Well, and before I pass it off to Will, I'd be so curious to take a look at all of your birth charts to see what correlations are in place that you would end up in the same place at the same time. Becca, of course, coming through the womb in this process, but with Will and Renn and Brigitte all together at the same moment. Clearly, you were drawn to that.
Yes.
And maybe that segues well into Will's presentation, because yours takes the archetypal into a cosmological perspective. So I'm going to pass it off to you, Will.
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Susan. And thank you, Becca and Renn, for such a rich and deep dive into these realms, which really are the treasures of the soul of the human consciousness. My presentation, I'm going to share a video, but just to preface it, when this material meets the mainstream scientific worldview, there's often a rejection and a disconnect. But what's been happening is that very recent studies are basically showing a very strong statistical significance for astrology. So much has happened just in the last few years in this arena that I think it's important. So what I'm doing, I'm taking a different view today. I'm actually going to give you a summary of that recent data because I think it has the potential to precipitate a major new scientific revolution. So without further ado, I'm going to start my video here. Right here. Let's see. Oh, right. I'm going to optimize. Here we go. Hello, friends. What a great joy and privilege it is to honor you, Stan, in this wonderful series of tributes, and also to share the space with old friends, Becca and Renn, and all of you. 25 years ago, I engaged in a spirited debate with my friend and colleague, Roger Walsh, one of the founders of transpersonal psychology. At that time, I wrote, "Astrological research is in its infancy. Sophisticated tests of astrology that embody the requisite multi-level epistemological complexity have yet to be conducted." I also praised the Tarnas and Grof data on astrology, which have been my key inspiration and formation and have been instrumental in my work for 35 years. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So goes the oft-heard refrain and challenge from materialist scientists and skeptics when confronted with extraordinary claims from frontier science, including astrology. Well, today, that demanded extraordinary evidence is in. Rigorous, replicated, voluminous evidence exists in the form of at least 70 scientific studies that strongly support astrology. Yet these data remain widely denied or ignored today by the materialist scientific community. But the tables have now turned. Extraordinary denial of scientific evidence for astrology demands extraordinary refutation of this voluminous evidence. The onus is now on the mainstream scientific community to either refute or explain these data, and so far neither is forthcoming. Failing this, the skeptics must either acknowledge these data as legitimate and their far-reaching implications, or else find themselves in stark betrayal of the very scientific principles they purport to cherish and uphold. Ultimately, it does not really matter how many thousands of scientific experiments show no astrological effects. 120 years ago, tens of thousands of physics experiments showed no quantum or relativistic effects. Yet the tiny number of experiments that did eventually toppled the entire edifice of classical physics. Today, we are at a similar tipping point with respect to astrology and frontier science more generally. So what are these hard scientific data? So much has happened in just the past few years that I'm eager to share with you today. About 70 years ago, the French statisticians Michel and François Gauquelin set out to disprove astrology once and for all using statistics. And to their shock, they actually uncovered correlations between planetary positions relative to the Earth in the birth charts of eminent leaders in various different fields. And they found correlations between the positions of Mars for the sports champions, and Saturn for scientists, and the moon for writers, and Jupiter for politicians and actors. And you can see some of these correlations here in this list. And these data continue to be replicated over the next 40 years as they continue this research. And they have a composite probability by chance of less than 1 in 5 million. These data have since been independently replicated at least 14 times. I want to now show you some of the examples of more recent studies that build on the Gokaland data. For example, Tarvainen has, the Finnish mathematician Tarvainen has done a number of remarkable studies with the Gokaland data, because the Gokaland data were very well vetted and a large sample size. And with contemporary computer methodologies, it has been possible to refine these studies tremendously. And so Tarvainen has been doing this. And for example, in the standard astrological handbook by Sakoyan and Acker, there are 316 statements about astrological factors in natal charts relating to 11 diverse professions. And so Tarvainen tested these in the Gokaland data and found that 57% of them held true, which in such a large database is highly statistically significant at about 1 in 1,000 probability by chance. And similarly, Tarvainen did studies of 2,700 mathematicians, checking 25 astrological factors said to favor mathematicians, and again found a similar highly significant statistical probability by chance. And so what this points to is that these factors seem to be existing in reality. Similarly, with a group of lawyers, 17,000 lawyers, he tested astrological factors relating to Mercury and Gemini and found statistical significance. If we look at chart rulers, and what I'm going to do now is just go through a very brief survey of some of the latest scientific research, so you can see that in each of these different traditional areas of astrology, there's now highly statistically significant evidence supporting traditional astrology. So for example, for 20,000 subjects, looking at the chart ruler, which is the planet of the ruling sign of that rules the sign of the ascendant, being located in a house related to the individual's professional group, with a probability by chance of 0.005, and then the ruler of the cusp being located in a house that's related to the profession, again, a very small probability, and then midpoints, finding that there's an excess of direct midpoints involving Jupiter with the sun and moon in the charts of 6,000 theologians, probability by chance, again, very small, 0.01. Similarly, in the charts of mathematicians, 0.03. And then synastry, the classic relational aspects between different charts. And in 41,000 charts of spouses, found an excess of harmonious interaspects. These are conjunctions and trines involving various planets, you can see there, with probability by chance of p-value of 0.02, and then the excesses of one spouse's sun located in the other's first, fifth, or seventh house, p-value of 0.01. And similarly with marriage partners, having Venus and Saturn aspects, transits, in a study that Tarvainen did, conjunctions, sextiles, and trines, transiting various planets. In some of the Gokaland data, he found a highly statistical significant result of 0.0005. And he also found that the solar progression was statistically significant. The elements in astrology, the 4 elements of earth, water, air, and fire, in a study by Patrick Curry, found correlations with fire and earth of 0.004 and air and earth 0.007. This is correlating with the Eysenck personality index. The modes, cardinal, fixed, and mutable signs, Tarvainen found high statistical significance in a study published in the Astrological Journal. Also, house systems in astrology. The Koch-house system, houses of, the definitions are here on the left side of the different types of house systems. And what the statistical studies are showing is that some of the house systems are more accurate than others. And the Koch-house system seems to be the most accurate overall, with these highly statistical significance for different p-values for the chart rulers in the central house. Central house means the house that relates to a particular professional group, like, for example, the 3rd house for journalists, because the 3rd house relates to communication. And you can see these statistical significance for other house systems in astrology. All of this is being generated on the computer, validating the legitimacy of scientific legitimacy of these house systems. Similarly, the orbs, astrological orbs, can be actually calculated through some of these studies. And what they're finding, for example, in this chart, this shows for a group of mathematicians, the aspects of mathematicians showing the p-value versus the orb, and showing that the orb has the lowest p-value, meaning the greatest statistical significance, between sort of 7 and 8 degrees, or somewhere in that range. And so this is very striking because across the different studies, these orbs can actually be calculated now through these statistical programs, astrological programs. And we're finding that the calculated orbs agree with the traditional orbs from astrological wisdom going back 2,000 years or more. And you can, for astrologers who know these orbs, you'll recognize these orbs as pretty consistent with traditional astrological practice. The strength of planets, according to astrological measures of strength, are also revealed clearly and statistically significantly in the Gokalan data. Zodiacs have also been studied, and the tropical zodiac has been shown to be more accurate than the sidereal zodiac. So statistics is actually beginning to reveal and contribute to astrology in its own way. All of these recent statistical studies, most of them have been conducted in the past 6 years or less, and they are confirming traditional astrology, which goes back 2,500 years. Now, there's another very interesting set of studies that has emerged from the French researcher Vincent Godbout, who has been matching biographies of celebrities with their astrological charts. And in this study, he did this by combining two big data analysis systems. One is an expert system called Mastro, which actually replaces the astrologer, in effect, by generating lists of keywords for each subject's astrological chart. And he compiled astrological information from 25 famous astrological writers to generate this system. And the Mastro program, you input an astrological chart and it outputs a list of keywords for that chart. And then he developed another big data tool, which he called Semantic Proximity Estimator, which automatically evaluates the similarity between keywords in one list and another, i.e. keywords between the astrological chart and the biographical history. So what he then did was to create interpretations for this system in the form of keywords for over 5,000 combined astrological factors. And he cross-referenced the meaning of each planet and sign with the meaning of each planet and aspect. So this was a huge amount of computer work, which was done with, and he also added the keywords for 858 midpoint interpretations from Ebertein's combination of stellar influences, which is also familiar to most astrologers. Just to give you an example of the amount of work that he did 5,000 of these. Here's one: Venus and Libra sextile Pluto. This particular one happens to be found in the chart of Bill Clinton. So we're combining the applicable words for keywords for Venus and Libra and Venus sextile Pluto. And the result is these words that you can see here. So Godbout then conducted a comprehensive study with 41 celebrities in which the task is to make these matches, correct matches between astrological charts on the one hand and published biographies using only the keyword lists from each. And the whole process is automated by the expert system software. For each of the 41 celebrities, the software created an astrological list made up of between 124 and 230 words. So that's essentially the chart reading. And then these astrological words are automatically matched against word lists extracted from celebrity biographies published in the French Le Monde. And so it generates these massive data sets. And you can see here the 41 celebrities, both on the horizontal and vertical column, matching the astrological chart with the biography. So for example, for one particular chart, this is for Pablo Picasso, you can see the black dots here are when there's a direct hit, like for example, the word love on the top found in the astrological chart and the word love found in the biography. And that gets a heavy weighting when you get an exact word-to-word match. And you see other of those black rectangles here. And then in another case, one of these red ones, you see, for example, passion here matched with love. Passion and love are close to each other. So it's not a perfect match, it's a near miss. And those are then missing by 1 degree. And so in this very meticulous way, he developed all of these cases, and then according to the binomial distribution, they have different probabilities. He did the mathematics of this. And in the case of a direct hit, like we just saw, out of 41 cases, matching 41 charts to 41 biographies, you would expect by chance getting just one of them correct. But if you allow for a near miss, then you would expect maybe to get, and this is calculated mathematically, by chance you would expect to get 2. And then if you allow the next degree of near miss, so as you decrease the accuracy that you're going to admit, then the number of hits that you're likely to get goes up. So what we see in this chart was the expected on the top is what we'd expect by chance. So the first one is for direct hits, we'd only expect 1 out of 41. For one near miss, we'd expect 2 out of 41 charts by chance, and similarly. And then below that is what we observe in the actual data generated by this expert system. We got 6 direct matches, and we got 7 with just 1 near miss. And you can see below those the probability that this would happen by chance in the range of 10 to the minus 4th, 10 to the minus 3rd, all the way across the board. They're ranging in statistical significance, high statistical significance, 10 to the minus 4th, 10 to the minus 3rd. So he then replicated this with another 32 celebrities. So he did it for the first 41 celebrities. Then he replicated this whole thing for another 32 celebrities. And then, as you can see in the top chart, it gets similar statistical significance. And then putting all of these 73 celebrities together in one analysis, a similar kind of analysis the computer did. And of course, the statistical significances go up quite a bit as the p-values go down to 10 to the minus 4th. And then finally, he added certain of the strong midpoints. And this increased the matching accuracy tremendously, so that the p-values fell now to 10 to the minus 7th to 10 to the minus 9th. So what we have here is an experiment, and this is from the conclusions in the published journal. This experiment goes further than previous matching. It removes human agency from the matching test and achieves thereby a fairness and objectivity. The sample size is large, the number of data points is very large. With such significant p-values, the results appear to be some of the best evidence yet obtained for astrology. Because human intervention is eliminated from the matchmaking, and the evidence far exceeds chance, this study suggests there is an objective basis for astrology. So here what we're finding, here's an example of an ancient astrological chart for someone born in 15 CE on the left, and on the right, today's equivalent chart. And what we're finding is that the best of contemporary scientific evidence is validating what the ancients knew 2,000, 2,500 years ago. And this is a very exciting breakthrough for astrology. So I'm going to stop share now and conclude with the question, what is the deeper meaning of these data? What I've tried to do here is give you just a very whirlwind tour of some of the recent astrological advances in astrological research. And together, I think we are at the threshold of a major new awakening about the very nature of the cosmos. The current scientific worldview, the Carl Sagan view of the cosmos, will soon be seen to be utterly paltry and naive, crudely mechanistic and shallow compared to the vast, intimate, living reality that is being revealed by the esoteric sciences. As Rumi put it, there is a secret turning in the heart which makes the entire universe turn. To my skeptical friends and colleagues, Roger Walsh and others, I say, please either refute or explain these 70 scientific studies if you can. Because what's happened is that the mainstream scientific community is ignoring these studies. It's similar to what happened with David Bohm, one of the greatest physicists of the 20th century, and his colleague Robert Oppenheimer and former mentor orchestrated a rejection of Bohm because Bohm was embracing hidden variables and was embracing these deeper dimensions of reality. And Oppenheimer enjoined the senior physicists around the world saying, if we cannot prove David Bohm wrong, then we must all agree to ignore him. This is the crisis that we're in now with respect to these crucial data from astrology. And so I invite the skeptics to refute these data. And if you cannot, then know that you are warmly welcomed into this grand new cosmic integral holo universe that is astrology, and which is in fact where science is trying to lead us if we would but follow the data. Thank you.
That was beautiful, Will.
Well, my apologies for getting the screen not working properly. It looked like something came up for a significant portion.
Well, I mean, I can't say that mathematically I can follow everything you were talking about, but what I see from your presentation is that mathematically, statistically, people have been taking what might just be considered synchronicity or be dismissed as a coincidence, right? And so, but when you calculate it across such a large number of subjects and you extrapolate out of that where the correlations are repetitive and consistent, and you're looking at their biographies and what they've done with their lives, what they came out of, and how they proceeded, and how it matches their chart. I think it's pretty remarkable. And wouldn't that be lovely if we could accept that part of reality, that we are part of a greater force that's so active in the universe?
Thank you, Susan. Yeah, I just felt this was important to share because it has the potential to precipitate a major scientific revolution if the scientific community takes these data seriously. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and this is amazing. I mean, this is a real challenge that you are giving to psychology, psychiatry, by that kind of language that they know, statistics and so on. And people can look at it, who knows about the statistic, they can check what is happening or not, And they have to also take the first step, for looking at this. People understand that is the synchronistic approach. Yeah. Like I think I told you, Carl Sagan, who told me at one point, who was livid when he heard about astrology. Mm-hmm. He said, astrology is nonsense. I don't remember the name at this point, Hubuch or whatever. He said, as I'm sitting here, I have more influence on you than Pluto, Yeah. And he was brilliant. He was thinking in terms of, what kind of mass we have, what the distance is, and so on. Of course, this is totally off. Anybody who tried to think that way doesn't really understand what astrology is.
That's right.
To start with the statistic in the first clip, there's the state,
Yeah.
Once you start look at the synchronistically, that's a different kind of situation. And the fact that you can bring mathematics into it and statistics is. Thank you so much.
It's just, I'm so surprised that there is so much research, statistic research going on astrology. I didn't know
It's a
that.
challenge, you know.
Did you know that there was so much research going on?
Well, I know some of them. I know the original one. This was
But these
5 million,
but
you know.
these are numbers.
And this they was only looking at what, and only the major chart.
That's right.
Ascent,
The
descent,
ascendant in the midheaven.
Because you have many other.
That's it.
Ways that Mars can be significant.
That's right. So basically, the original research was only looking at one factor, and now with the new complexity, the computers
people are looking at a very different kind of approach.
Yeah.
You know, they try to bring everything that astrology would be saying.
Yeah, so it's the computer. Actually, back then, the skeptics would basically say, we have this profound science, it shows no effects, therefore they're not there. Where the truth was, no, the science is an inadequate net. It's too crude and clumsy to even pick up these effects. And only now are the computers just beginning to become sophisticated enough to begin to very crudely mimic what astrologers actually do. And that's why these effects are becoming highly significant statistically. Yeah.
I remember an amazing metaphor you used, Bill, that trying to look at astrology with the traditional statistics would be like trying to analyze the ink in Salieri's manuscripts and determine why his music is inferior to Mozart's.
That's
like totally wrong approach.
Exactly.
One thing I found is that anyone who actually takes the time to just learn the absolute basics of astrology, even from a very skeptical position, in order to disprove it, goes on to become an astrologer. Because if you just take that, put in that little bit of effort to learn what the principles are, you come to see for yourself that it works. And I know many astrologers who started off as skeptics who got into it to disprove it. And you know what we see from many of the scientists who just dismiss it is they're not actually applying their own methodology of just entering into the techniques and seeing, does this work? And it does.
That's beautiful. Yeah, no. Thank you.
Important to understand that astrology is a much deeper science than what you read in the magazines. Like for the next week, if you're a Taurus or something like that. I mean, that's just so stupid. And so there's so much more to astrology than it's in these newspapers.
And I believe
what's amazing that you have in astrology is a combination of astronomy, you know, mathematics, and then you also bring in the beauty of mythology, you know, spirituality, and so on. It's that the combination of those two extreme things makes them beautiful.
Yeah, there's such a beautiful kind of harmony there. Astrology is simply the consequence of what's called quantum entanglement. I prefer the term quantum communion because it's not a tangle, it's a harmony. It's a cosmic unity and harmony. But in physics, that's just seen as happening on the physical plane, but what's also happening on the vertical planes of consciousness, this quantum communion, this everything is connected to everything else. And astrology is simply a consequence of that. And it's a beautiful unveiling of that. So it's such a profound revelation that awaits those who will open this door. Yeah.
Maybe it could be seen as the notes for the music. I mean, like the partitur. I don't know the word. You know, if you read the how do you say in English? The partitur, the written notes for the music. You know, if you have a beautiful symphony, and then when you study astrology, you see what what's behind it, you know,
Yes.
how it's orchestrated and what voices are there and what harmonies and things like that. So maybe that's a bit like that.
It's very much like that.
Yeah, would that make sense, Becca?
Yes,
Renn?
very much so. It's astrology is the underlying order of the nature of the cosmos. It includes science as one limiting special case, our current science, and then it goes far beyond it. And actually, science is really still in its adolescent rebellion against astrology, which is its parent, because science was born through astronomy, and it all came from astrology. So it's really still an adolescent rebellion that we're trying to get through. And then, you know, what happens when you get a little older, you start to appreciate your parents again. And we're trying to get there with science and astrology.
Well, before
And
I
astrology
pass it,
gives so much. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Stan. Go ahead.
Stan.
I just wanted to say that astrology is giving such a beauty to the universe, you know, which is already beautiful. Doing it with looking at it and with psychonauts and so on. But this is the whole other dimension that is unbelievable.
It really makes a conventional science seem like a surface phenomenon, which it is, because it focuses only on the mechanistic side, the physical side, which is the skin of the cosmos. The depth and the riches come through what Bohm called the implicate order, what all the spiritual traditions have understood. Astrology is the science of consciousness mapped out on a cosmic plane, which is replicated in each of us as a fractal miniature of the cosmos. So it's an absolutely exquisite science. And the reason I wanted to present this material today was just to show you that statistics is trying to force this upon the scientific community. Of course, they're pushing it away like, no, no, no. But, you know, these probabilities by chance of these phenomena, astrological phenomena, you know, 1 billion to 1. I mean, it's very clear where the evidence is leading. The scientific community is refusing to follow. That's what we're dealing with. We see it the same with the near-death experience. You know, and these scientific data are basically overwhelming now. 25,000 people have experienced documented cases of near-death experience, and the mainstream scientific community ignores it. You can't take it in. So this is, of course, that's changing. I think the near-death experience is finally really shifting the contemporary scientific worldview, but it's a very slow process. And astrology is still absolutely anathema to the mainstream. I mean, it's really, but the data is now there. It's very, very amazing.
Bill wrote a great paper a while back for CIIS, and he mentions Bohm reference to 3 layers of reality. There's matter, energy, and meaning. And physics deals with matter and energy, but not with meaning. And meaning is just as important, equally, if not more important. And astrology deals with meaning, the invisible pattern behind things, the blueprints.
Yeah, that was Bohm's whole contribution from his implicate order, which has been a really important contribution that's receiving now more attention finally. If you haven't seen the film Infinite Potential, I recommend it.
Yeah, and I just want to add one last thing, is that over the course of the last several months, through my program that I was taking with Becca, Tarnas, we were asked to review our past through the lens of what transits were happening. And it was just remarkable for me to see the beauty of those transits and the lessons that were possible, and how at 62, looking back into my 20s, to see if those things hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be where I was today, that everything that happened needed to happen. And if I had understood more about the planetary influences, it perhaps wouldn't have been so painful. But in looking back, I felt so blessed. I felt that I had been guided, and that there was this invisible hand sort of directing me along the way. So I want to ask Jim how we're doing on time, because we're well past 90 minutes at this stage. I don't know how you want to handle the end here.
Well, we're closing in on 2 hours, but this has been so rich and layered, I must say, that I think it was well worth the the extra time. And so I think I'll just thank all of you for your contributions. And maybe if we can do this with discipline, just for Becca, Renn, and Bill, just to take, a minute for some final comment you want to make about this session, and then Stan and Brigitte, if you want to make a closing comment, then we'll end our session for today. But this has been just too rich to stop in a peremptory way. Becca, you go first, then Renn, then Will. And
there's so much. There's so much that one could say to try and wrap this up. But one thing that I'm just recognizing in terms of what astrology implies, what its challenge to the scientific, the materialist scientific paradigm demonstrates, and then also the full breadth of Stan's work over the many decades. These all challenge the passing paradigm. And we live in such an extraordinary time because it is one where there isn't one reigning paradigm. We're living between worldviews, and to watch the breakup of an old worldview and witness the coalescence of a new one, but still be in the middle where we're trying to reconcile old and new. It feels really extraordinary to live in that moment of both crisis and potential. And any science that incorporates astrology will inherently be changed. Any worldview that recognizes that what astrology implies about the nature of our cosmos will be changed. And it feels like such a privilege, even though it's also a challenge to live in this time.
Thank you. Thank you. Renn.
Thank you, Becca, and thank you, and Bill, for your excellent presentations today. I always learn something when I listen to you. Yeah, I like what you said about the times that we're in. The Buddhists have an expression: we can't remove the shoe of ego, we have to wear it out. And I think we're seeing that right now with certain elements in the Euro-American culture, certain shadow elements that have been brought to the surface and are now kind of in the process of self-destructing. It's quite an incredible process. The world transits, the way that Rick has initiated our understanding of them, shed so much light on this process. And I would recommend checking out some of our videos on ANN on YouTube. Becca's in some of those. And in an ongoing way, we talk about, what's happening this week, this month, and it will help to illuminate some of the patterns behind the news within the news. There's a great metaphor. We still have to keep our hands on the wheel and drive the car, but astrology is like a roadmap or a weather report. It can be very valuable to know what's coming ahead, so we can slow down or maybe we can speed up. There's curves. It's a very beneficial extra map. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Becca and Renn. I'll just say that astrology and archetypal cosmology are opening us to the vastness of the human psyche and its oneness with the cosmos. The universe, the planets, they're not what science says they are. The planets are not just big balls of rock and gas circulating some gigantic thermonuclear explosion called the sun. They are so much more than that. The planets are like icebergs of consciousness, and the physical planet is just the tip of that iceberg. So we are literally bathed in all manner of spiritual realities that are infusing our every moment. And basically the cosmos is rich with these living spiritual realities that are holding us in their cosmic embrace, and they are in us. They're not causing things, they live in us. So we are in them and they are in us. And astrology and archetypal cosmology open us to this incredibly expanded understanding of life, the universe, and the richness of it all. It doesn't deny science. It just reveals that science is just the mechanical workings of a much more vast and rich and living cosmos, which astrology invites us to usher in. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Susan, do you have a quick
Thank
comment?
you. Yeah, thank you so much for such a beautiful time. You know, it's now 2 hours and going from archetypes, you know, to mathematics and astronomy and so on. It's amazing. Thank you so much. And I will just ask one thing about Becca. You're very close both to Rick and to Max. Where are we going now with the new movie that's going to happen? That's going to edit something fantastic to what we were talking today. Could you say something about it?
Sure. So the 10-part film series, Changing of the Gods, which is the initial creative spark of that, comes from Kenny Ausubel, the co-founder of Bioneers, and then he has been creating it along with Maximilian de Arman and Theo Badashi and others, and it presents through 10 episodes the correlations with Uranus-Pluto periods in history, and it's almost complete. It's been a 6-year project, and they really had to see it through to the end of the Uranus-Pluto period. They couldn't have released it earlier because the story, as we all know, was not done until last year. And it's slated to be released independently online this fall. So probably September, late September, October. Yeah.
Beautiful movie.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward when it comes to other people, you know.
Well, thank you all so much. This has been very interesting and very wonderful to see you and to get all the information. And it's just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank all of you. And thank you, Susan and Jim, for your incredible work hosting this. And what a privilege.
Thank you, Susan and Jim. It's been an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Susan, do you have just a final comment?
Just thanks everybody, you know. I mean, every time I learn so much. That's what's so great about this tribute. It's been a gift back to me each time. Jim, I can't thank you enough for making this possible.
Well, it's been a total
Jim,
pleasure.
your endings were wonderful in these things. I hope you can add something yourself.
Well, you know what's striking me, Stan, is that, you know, there's nothing dated about you. Mm-hmm. If you think of many of the great personages of intellectual history, you know, they have some breakthroughs, but there's also a lot of things that are dated very quickly, either because of a limited vision of reality or a racial perspective on reality or a mechanistic sense of possibility. But, you know, what's coming to me now over 5 sessions as we, you know, really celebrate your life and work is that virtually every aspect of your pioneering journey has opened up the future from the past that so desperately needs to be shed. And whether it's the work with the efficacy of psychedelics, whether it's the development of the holotropic breath work, whether it's the new cartography of the psyche, which has been an extraordinary contribution to the world understanding of how we are formed in utero and transgenerationally. And now, I mean, what you did with Rick Tarnas and the creation of archetypal astrology and the applicability and in terms of the relationship between, you know, psychedelic experiences and astrological alignments has all been quite an extraordinary opening. So in some profound and mysterious and I'm sure miraculous way, you've been like an hourglass where everything got squeezed through you and your psyche. And out of that has come an expansiveness, a panoramic view of human possibility within an implicate cosmic order. So I just want to acknowledge that this is not inconsequential, everyone. This is rare. And so the time that we're taking to honor this great spirit is time well taken. So I just want to salute you, Stan, and tell you how much we all love you and appreciate everything that you provided for each and every one of us so that we can prosper and take your work now into the human future. And I think that what is exciting at this moment of your 90th year is that the old paradigm is so distorted and so compacted and so self-alienating that you can just feel the world psyche wanting to just push through like the dandelion breaking open the concrete. And so this is an extraordinarily potentiated, precious moment in your 90th year. And we just love and salute you. So thank you for that. And thank you, Susan. Thank you all, Renn and Will and Becca today for your testimony and tribute to a great man. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again tomorrow on Humanity Rising. We'll be turning to another really towering intellectual figure, Bruce Lipton, who was a professor of medicine at Stanford University and wrote a groundbreaking book, The Biology of Belief. It's not only true that the planets affect who we are, but our cells, our atoms inside our bodies affect who we are. And that the fulcrum between the two is our own intent, our own awareness that affects our cells through our beliefs, and in turn can absorb the cosmic alignment of the larger universe, refracting every instant of every day through us to our own benefit or demise, depending on our ability to refract it in a way that heals or not. So these are weighty issues that we contemplate on Humanity Rising, and we all appreciate your attention to these matters because these are the deepest levels of meaning. It's beneath the mechanical. It's beneath the energetic. It gets to the wellspring of what it truly means to be a conscious human being alive today. So thank you. And see you again tomorrow here on Humanity Rising, same time, same station on Zoom.
Love.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Much love.
Thank you.
Love you all.
Thanks,
Much
Stan,
love.
Brigitte.
Thank you so much.
Once more, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you, Stan. Beautiful.
Oh, you still here?
I'm still here, but
Yeah.
We're leaving.
We're still here.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. That was great.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Brigitte.
It's
Love you.
amazing.